Time for VUC. In our 11th year, with us on our journey this year, Simwood.com. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Greenfield Tech. Go to greenfield.tech and see how they can make your tech dreams both feasible and affordable. Our conference bridge is the best you'll ever find at zipdx.com. VUC.me is hosted on Bluehost. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are provided by voxphone.com. And now the live voice will tell you that this is VUC669 for October 27th, 2017, evaluating wireless carrier coverage, ladies and gentlemen, with an illustrious panel starting on my left, not to say extreme left, with Mr. Andy Smith.
Why am I always left? I guess it's the A, isn't it? Right. Hello.
Could be. And now our Scottish ambassador, Mr. Corrado Mela.
Yes, Corrado Mela. Hello.
Corrado Mela. Thank you. James Bodie is with us.
Hello. That's all you get from me.
And Kathleen King is with us.
Hi, guys.
Nice to have you, Kathleen. Thank you for joining us. And, of course, the eminent Michael Graves, looking like he's on another call, as always.
I'm just looking across two screens. It's one of the problems of having camera on one screen and two screens in front of you. I always like slightly looking away.
Too many screens.
As well.
All right, as promised, I'm going to put the film strip back. That means you're going to be able to watch Kathleen the whole time, and anybody else who is of interest. And the first thing I want to mention is that we moved, my wife and I moved house recently. I think we already covered this in one other session because I had to do something. And this time I'm trying to establish whether I should stay with Free Mobile, which is a very good deal financially, or move on to something else. So the first thing I did was order a couple of SIMs. And we want to talk about eSIMs in a few minutes as well. But right now we're talking physical SIMs, so it's the post office and the box, the mailbox, and the, registered letters and blah, blah, blah. So I got my two SIMs. Oh, and James is showing all his SIMs. Let me show that. Keep going, James. Yeah, there you go.
Only one phone, Randy.
That's his phone.
So those are my spares, and then that's my working one.
Well, I don't have as many phones, but last week I did have as many SIMs. Kathleen, how many phones and how many SIMs do you have?
Well, I have one that I normally use. That's my US phone. And then I have an international phone with 4 SIMs at the moment, but I can't guarantee they're all still working.
Right. Who has dual SIM phones? But Corrado, you told me you did recently.
Yes. Both handsets I use are dual SIMs.
And what are they, out of curiosity?
Right. It's, they're two obscure Chinese manufacturers.
Okay, that's close enough.
Yes.
Anybody else have, Michael, you have dual SIM phones?
No, I only carry one phone too, which makes me anomalous in this group.
And I guess Andy didn't raise his hand, or did he?
No, I don't have a dual SIM phone. I just carry, I carry an iPhone and I carry a Nexus 5X. That's it.
So you carry 2 phones. Anyway, I do have a dual SIM phone. In fact, I have in this house, we do have 2 dual SIM phones, but what we found out in the States, this is going to be one of these duh moments. I know everybody knows this, except I never thought of it, which is that you can only be on 4G on one of the 2 SIMs, right? Everybody's nodding, right? Because you always knew that.
It depends on the model of the phone. But you know.
Are you telling? Well, there is no iPhone dual SIM, right?
No, there isn't.
So what's dual SIM?
Sorry. There are some additional gizmos that you can connect to the iPhone that are multi-SIM. I've seen one demonstrated on a YouTube video with 3 SIMs connected. Yes,
that's interesting. But we're going to get into the SIMs and the multiple SIMs and the eSIMs in a moment. I just want to mention though that, and I've probably already said this because I'm old, so bear with me, that when we got to the States, I did not realize that I was expecting to have dual SIM, so have a T-Mobile account on one SIM which I did, and my free mobile, which roams for free, and have data on both. Well, you kind of do, but only one on my phone, which happens to be this year a OnePlus 3T, which at the time was their latest phone. Anyway, only one of those phones will do LTE at once. So you could carry two phones or whatever. The point is, we're talking about evaluating carriers, and I was hoping I could have two SIMs and evaluate the carriers. You can't do that without a lot of screwing around. You have to turn one SIM off, turn the other one on, etc. So that's all well and good. Anyway, here's what I was faced with. Oh, I've got to do a screen share. Here's what I was faced with when I first, oh no, where is it? And I can't find the application now. Isn't that wonderful?
Too many windows.
No, it's not. It's that.
Sorry, Randy, if I can fill the timer until you find that, new iterations of Android-based phones usually have a SIM that works on 4G and the other on 3G, and they can work together at the same time, especially with Nougat and the latest one, the Oreo, I think.
Yep.
It can work on both.
I'm sorry, I finally found the slide, but can do what? Can it work on LTE on both SIMs?
No, 4G LTE on one SIM and 3G on the other.
Right, but I know that. But that was a problem.
What advantage does that give, though?
No,
you've got one data connection presumably available
Here's
time.
And I think the answer, Andy, and it's true, you don't change it on the plane when you're landing, I guess. In other words, you can have your two SIMs, but I didn't find it more useful than simply not having to change the SIM when you land at someplace. So it's true that when I come from here and get to Amsterdam, I get an SMS saying it's going to cost XX, and thank you, welcome, roaming, etc. But if I go to the States, I'll get that same message, and then I can switch over to, say, a T-Mobile. By the way, I don't like T-Mobile, and I do not recommend them anymore. Now, here is, without further ado, okay, so I'm presented with this. I am sitting in my office on Edge, which would be okay because you can see I've got a great Wi-Fi signal. However, it doesn't even stay on Edge. It drops off completely. And before you say, well, what do you need data for? You got a great Wi-Fi signal, which is, by the way, gigabit Ethernet now. But the point is, nobody can call me. If I drop off, I'm dropped off the carrier. And look at Michael. Look at this. I'm going to give you something even more interesting to look at, which is my voice modulated by Michael's whatever that is that he's using. Anyway, so James, I want to call on you to help us look at the display. Forget the live box, which now everybody knows my SSID. I'll have to change it if you're driving by the house. But point is, we've got a really good signal because I'm right next to it. But on the Edge, what are we looking at here? Obviously, it's in the orange, almost red. Not a great signal even for Edge.
No, indeed. Edge is a 2G modulation scheme, and you're talking about needing something like 90 dBm to have a real operating environment with that. And you're what, neg 103?
I'm wanting.
So you're about 13 dB down on where you need to be to have a good experience.
And when I speak to somebody, if the phone rings and I'm talking to someone, they immediately say you're breaking up, or I can't hear you, or I don't hear them, or so. There's always a problem. It isn't Edge, as I said. I've got a great Wi-Fi signal. I don't care about Edge, but what I care about is the fact that when you're on Edge, where you're supposed to be in a 4G neighborhood, in a neighborhood that has LTE, a city or an area. What the problem is that if you're on Edge, it means that the signal's so bad, your voice signal's not going to be great either. Let's move over to, we can't do that.
Well, that's not true. I mean, if you had a reasonable signal strength, so neg 90 dBm or better, then you'd be pretty good. And you could
hang on a sec. I'm looking at my phone. I'm looking at that app on my phone. And I'm on T-Mobile's LTE network. And the LTE network I'm showing -103.
Yes, indeed. Now let's
that's
explain that. There was a reason for that. Is because the different modulation schemes have different capabilities. So 2G, because it's older, needs more signal strength than 3G, and 3G needs more signal than LTE. So as you get more modern, you're gaining in the modulation scheme. So
and you're in the yellow there, so you're just below green, Michael. So you have a 102.
Yeah, that's
actually,
Corrado
in my
who's showing
experience,
his phone.
90 is minus 90 is actually excellent, right, James? For LTE.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, it's Corrado who's flashing his.
I'm sorry, Corrado is doing that,
Yes.
but James, minus 9. Oh, that's Corrado that's doing it.
Yes,
I thought
yes.
Michael was showing his. All right, Corrado, you have that's a very good signal. Around minus 100 is very good. I think you don't get any better than 85, 90, right? Anyway.
Yeah, but note
You need to be very
that
close to
because
the
he's on
to the max.
LTE,
Right,
the,
LTE.
the signal that he requires to be in the green is less than you were showing on your 2G.
Okay.
So what we're saying is that the more modern waveforms work better over range than the old-fashioned ones, even though they're operating wider.
If you look at my screen, you can see that the green goes further than 90, goes to 95.
Yes,
minus
and
95.
what you'll find is that your green scale will move up and down depending on how wide your phone is working.
Yeah.
So if you're working super fast, 300 megabit per second waveform, then it'll drop back a bit to, I guess, around the same sort of, probably slightly better than 2G. But if you're working narrow LTE, it'll go well up. And we're not at this stage talking about IoT, but IoT, like IoT narrowband, because it's only 200 kilohertz wide and reasonably slow, the radio path capability or the signal strength that you need to work satisfactory is tiny. We're talking about some 25 dB better than 3G. It's absolutely awesome. But the amount of power that you need depends on the modulation scheme and the data rate at which you're working. Was that clear?
Yep.
Pretty much.
There's a lot of complexity in this equation, in this thing. So it's not as simple as saying I need neg 90 dBm to work. It really depends on what your phone's doing, what the base station the other end is doing, and how your phone reacts to it.
This has some practical implications as well, too, right? Because the upshot of that is that the cell density can be lower because you're able to go further with a given signal, which also means that the number of clients per cell site may go up substantially.
Yeah, and when we were talking about the ultra narrow IoT narrowband stuff, it means that because you've got that extra link budget you can play with, it means that the transmitter at the remote end can be very, very low power. And that in turn means that you can get away with primary batteries with a year or something like 10 years, because the amount of power that you're actually using to send your updates is tiny. So your battery's going to last for ages.
Not only, usually the data sent by IoT devices is very small bursts of data, very little.
Yes, it's very small bursts of, very small bursts of data at very low signal levels. And the end result is your battery lasts forever, or 10 years.
And the bandwidth used is very little.
Yes. Yeah, typically with IoT narrowband, we're talking about, what's the maximum? 100 kilobit per second is the maximum, but normally a lot less than that.
Yeah.
It is interesting watching this change. I've actually just switched cell. So I now actually just switched onto an LTE cell. So I now have LTE on there, and indeed the graph changed, and I am at a much lower minus 114 dB. I was at minus 101, attached HSPA to a different cell. So the signal strength has considerably dropped, but the signal quality should have improved.
Does the app allow you to change cells, or did you just do it manually to a different network?
No, it auto changed. It auto changed.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to show another
Wonderful program.
Here's another tool that you can use to look at. This is Sensorly, and I put it in the IRC, by the way. Sensorly has maps, and they're as well as OpenSignal, by the way. Both have maps that are crowdsourced, I guess Sensorly is. And we're looking at Paris, which is a very densely populated area. Let's look at the center of Paris. So you see that if you were unlucky enough to live in one of the areas where it's gray and there's no signal, we're looking at 4G, of course.
So what are we looking at here, Randy? Is this a result of crowdsourced readings, or is this a prediction?
Well, this is interesting. This is a coverage and signal strength as measured by the Sensorly crowd, 1,000 to 1,800 measurements displayed on the map. If we go to the speed measurements, this is kind of interesting, actually. So sensorly.com, sensorly.com. If you look at, these are tests that people do. I mean, if I do a test, I'm not in Paris, but if I did, you would see it here. So you're seeing, unfortunately, I don't know how you can see my cursor. I guess there's no way for me to provoke that to happen, but in the center, you'll see some red dots. Let's see how, and also, I don't know how close we can get. Here's a funny looking, looks like a cartoon character lying on its side, right in the middle there. Did we get that bigger?
Yeah, you see your arrow. If your
that's as big.
Move it
that's
around.
That's as large as I can get it. The point is, well, wait a minute. Here's a, for some reason, the target is a parking garage. Okay, in the middle. So if you look a little bit left of that, you see. Here we go. The Barberousse Paris. Whatever. Anyway, the point is that's red, which is a very poor area. The green is 70%.
Sorry if I can interject that. That looks to be the download speed.
It is, yeah.
And it might well be the device rather than coverage. Because everything else is practically green, so it should be over 30 megabits per second. I think that is a fluke.
Yeah, and also they have their ways of testing. So here's the upload, same caveat. You're looking at what could be the device, could be a lot of things. Here's the cover back in the coverage though, which is a little bit different thing. How do we get rid of this? The coverage. So these are crowdsourced maps, but they may not reflect your actual results. So we recommend, at least I do.
I have to say that, I mean, we're looking at 4G here. But
yes.
Signal strength in bars is reasonably meaningless when we just explained that the actual signal strength really is linked to what mode you're working in.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at 3G. Orange claims to have the best network. Now here we're looking as close as we can get. I don't see any dark. Well, the dark areas, I don't know how visible this is to everybody.
Pretty good.
Well, I mean, now I'm not seeing the dark actually that well, but the point is the dark areas. So these are different providers. Let's go through this really quickly because I want to move on to something else. So we're looking at 2G, 3G right now. Orange claims to have the best network. Orange was financed by our tax dollars, by the way. So bully for them. This is another company, SFR. Here's Free, who is the interloper in all this. Yet Free seems to have, well, it blinked for a second, but they seem to have okay coverage. Bouygues.
Well, it's because they're roaming on somebody else's network when they're out.
Well, only partly. Come on now, James. They did a great thing, and they're not always roaming. There are two different kinds of free.
Look
at this font. Wait a minute.
Did a very, very clever thing there.
Let me point out that phone is on this. Look at this. This is FON, phone, right? Phone Wi-Fi.
Yeah, but that's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it is Wi-Fi. All right, let's get off the Wi-Fi.
Can I explain what Free did that was very, very clever?
Yes.
Which is they equipped their own set-top boxes, or anybody who wanted one, with a 3G cell. Bearing in mind that the place where you tend to make most of your calls is actually at home, they were able to transfer a substantial proportion of their total network traffic onto their own cells. And of course, the backhaul, the power, the complete cost of running that was borne by the home user. So if all of a sudden, say, 50% of your traffic is cost-free, but you're paying domestic roaming rates for the other 50%, it means that all of a sudden your costs have reduced by 50%, and you can be very competitive then with your pricing, which is exactly what they did. So they came in with an almost unbelievable cost per month for their price plans, and they've kind of forced the other network operators to drop their prices as well.
And as I told you when we talked about this before, James, I don't think there's that many people who got that thing because you had to order it specially. I did order it. It didn't work for me, but that doesn't matter.
I'm not convinced. I think that used to be the case with the older boxes, but I think the newer models actually have them built in as standard.
It's possible that the new model, which is a much cheaper plan, like 19 euros a month. Anyway, just to say what we're looking at here, this is another place you can go to evaluate signals, which is opensignal.com. Funny, I would have thought it was org. opensignal.com, opensignal.com. This is, again, Paris, and it's also it's free to show what their coverage is. But these are things you need to look at for yourself in your area. And Kathleen is doing that right now. I can see her concentrated look. Either that or she's answering emails for Free Switch. Shame on you. Shame on you, Kath. Anyway, so this is something you can look into. What are some of the other tools that we haven't mentioned? You guys are all hip to all this stuff. So,
well, one thing that you didn't show about the network setting for light that you showed before, that it also shows you what kind of coverage you have from neighboring cells, so you can see what are the cells.
It's not, oh, that's better. Your webcam.
Yeah, that's true. Although I showed the. Yeah, I didn't show that exact thing, I guess.
Yeah,
because my coverage is bad.
You can see if there's a neighboring cell and how it's behaving, and it's changing live under your nose. Yeah. By the way,
there are many reasons.
FW means femtowatt, so very little.
Yeah, because you might have a reasonably decent signal from a base station, and yet you'll be offloaded to another cell. And the reason for that normally is the cells are just rearranging their traffic. So you'll have one cell that's totally overused, and the neighbor one is very lightly used. So it'll offload some users onto the lightly loaded cell.
Just as an example, we have a very powerful cell on top of a hill, but a relay cell in town. And sometimes I jump between the two.
In fact, that is a very common occurrence. One of the problems with putting masts on tops of hills is that they tend to be heard for miles and miles around, and they can get a good signal strength into lots of places. But the problem is, at the top of the hill, they hear too much. And so quite often the cell on top of the hill will try and offload traffic into the smaller cells.
Do we know how they do that?
Load. Yeah, all the time.
Do we know, James, do we know how they do that?
Yes, yeah. Yes, we do. But it's complicated. Do you really want to know how these things work?
Yes,
we do. I know about that was
inquiring minds.
A fishing operation to get some information out.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can do to get around this problem of really, really poor coverage in your house. And of course, your house is always going to give you worse coverage than you'll get outside, because the signal's got to get into your house. And if you live in a house like mine, about 400 years old, with walls, massive walls, then
that varies by band as well, right? Because
it does.
Out 700 megahertz, and the reason why 700 megahertz is such great spectrum is because it penetrates better.
Well, yes, in some scenarios, in most scenarios, in fact, it propagates further. So the radio loss that you see over distance is less with a lower the frequency. So
you
yeah,
can't have
that's why
quite
700 is good.
You can't have quite the cell density though with lower frequencies.
Oh, that's good.
I believe that to be true anyway.
Yeah, it is.
So one of the things that we're looking to do here with our little pilot study in the Chalk Valley is to deploy something like between 50 and 70 4G cells along the 13.8 kilometer length of the Chalk Valley. One of the big advantages of that is that each cell gets to reuse all of the spectrum each time. And so our aggregate throughput will be far, far higher than if you have a very small number of big masts up on tops of the hills. Because as Scotty used to say on the Starship Enterprise, you can't beat the laws of physics. You can only use that spectrum once only within the coverage area of the cell. And so if you've got a big mast, you have a total amount of throughput you can get through on that set of frequencies. If you have lots of small cells using the same spectrum, each one can get the same amount of bandwidth through. And so, 50 to 70 nodes are going to move a lot more traffic than 5 big macro cells on tops of the hills. Obviously.
And it probably costs less.
Yeah, it's also good that in the particular area that we're talking about, there's not going to be a huge amount of vehicular movement, because of course, as we switch around, as you go around and you switch cells, because we're using many small cells with relatively short ranges, we've got a lot more signaling traffic to deal with. Because most people don't move that far, they're likely to stay attached to the same cells, so not so much signaling traffic.
Okay. Anyway, coming back to Randy's problem.
Well, wait a second, James, because here's a different reading. So as I showed the fixed thing, but here's the, well, it's hard to get it focused though, isn't it? Here's that edge reading, which is 105. Now, this is not these signal strengths, as you pointed out, James, are not the same thing in different technologies. Here's the SFR. Can we get this in focus, please? Hello.
Back a bit.
It's not doing a great job. Let's see. Come on.
So what are we looking at here, Randy?
Well, this is a different carrier in a different phone. And of course I have, as per scientific research rules, changed the phones around to make sure it wasn't the phone. Anyway, you see 111 LTE there, and it's in the yellow, almost between orange and yellow, actually. This does not jump around. My other phone will jump, my other SIM will jump between edge to no coverage at all to occasionally HSPA. And then it might be on LTE for 10 seconds.
You can check on the other page if you have competing cells that are pulling you one way or the other. You're probably in a borderline area with many cells.
This is worse than a borderline area. This is an area which, if you look on these, when I look on the coverage maps, there's absolutely no coverage. This is the whole street here. No, it's true. Now, once you get up, let me just finish the thought, which is once we get up on the second floor, I've got LTE everywhere and it's fine. It's not wonderful. It's not the greatest, but it's okay. But on the street, there's only 1 or 2 carriers of the 4 available that actually work. And unfortunately, Free, which is a very good deal, and I like them a lot, does not. It does not work on the ground floor. It will work a little on the first floor. It works okay on the second floor, but it does not work on the ground floor. And let's face it, I'm in an office. Also, I looked into, and James, you pointed out, they have femtocells. Okay, so I looked into the Orange femtos. First of all, I looked into Orange's coverage. They claim to have the best network. We're on their fiber now. But in fact, Orange's SIM did no better than the Free SIM. It's probably some of the same towers, if not all.
Yep.
That did not play. It wasn't edge, but it was edgy. So long story short is that I could not use the femtocell. There's another solution, and James and I talked about this too, which is to be getting calls on Wi-Fi. Just use all Wi-Fi and roll your own. We could do that.
Yeah, Randy, can I just stop you there? Am
Sure.
I the only one getting drop packets from Randy?
Oh my God.
Or is Randy dropping packets?
No, absolutely.
I
Fine.
am dropping packets on my fiber.
No.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Because I'm dropping sort of one in every 3 words from you, and just trying to work out whether the problem's my end or your end.
It's your end. It's your end, James. No.
Okay.
Sorry, my end.
Yes.
Where's the problem? My end.
Bandwidth, Wi-Fi. I don't know.
I will change things then.
Randy, is your house surrounded by others?
There are other houses here, yeah.
Stone built, probably.
just
old houses.
To get to James's point about the bandwidth.
Yeah.
It's 940 megabits down, and something like it's going to be about 230 up. So James, Raspberry.
So it's unlikely to be your end. But then again, what's your buffer bloat like?
0.
Oh, 0. Okay,
I mean, it's A+. You'll see.
We'll let you off then. Anyway, I've just changed broadbands to my other one, so hopefully I can hear everything now. So anyway, the big question that everybody wants to hear the answer to is, now we've ascertained the fact that you've got rubbishy coverage in your downstairs office.
And yet, look at my fiber coverage. So what can you do about it? Well, what I just finished with, James, was I could obviously roll my own because I've got great internet coverage, but I want to keep my other number. So the next question is, I'm going to stop that.
But what do you mean by roll your own?
Well, that's it. I could have IPI. Andy knows IPI, and we all know IPI. It's a French. So I could get a number on IPI, IPPI.fr or .com, and use that with their Wi-Fi client. I mean, I'm in my office, and my office has the bad coverage.
Okay, so, but that will give you outbound calls. But what about calls and SMS to your mobile number?
Well, it would work fine as long as I sit here. But if I'm outside, it's not going to work well. So the solution is to find a carrier that works in the areas I go in. No?
Okay.
Or a carrier that supplies you a femtocell to install in your office that takes charge of your phone when you are in.
Yes, but that would be Orange because you can't. No.
Yeah.
So
I think here in the UK, James, correct me if I'm wrong, there are a number of suppliers that do, including 3.
However, the big gotcha there is that inevitably the network operator who supply the femtocell will set it up in such a way that it will only service users who are using their own native service.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So if you've got an MVNO, domestic roaming MVNO type arrangement like Free, then it won't work.
No, yeah.
So that's the problem with that. So let's discount that one for now and go over to the next.
It's dead, Jim. It's dead, Jim.
Yeah.
Which is 3GPP Wi-Fi roaming, also known rather confusingly as IWLAN. So little I, big W, LAN, IWLAN. Nothing to do with Apple at all, even though Apple support it. So what that does is that allows you to attach to the network as if you're doing a voice over LTE call.
Dinner will be coming soon.
But instead of using the LTE data subsystem to connect you to the infrastructure, you use Wi-Fi instead. And you end up with something which looks remarkably, something which looks remarkably like that, if you can see it. It says 3 Wi-Fi call.
Ooh.
I don't know whether you can actually see that.
Yes, we saw. I can see it.
So what's happened here is my phone has decided that it's got a nice fast Wi-Fi connection, and it's set up, configured so that when it has a fast Wi-Fi connection, it will then try and connect into the 3 network using the Wi-Fi. And if it can authenticate and it checks out as being a good fast link, it will then switch over the service so that my phone is now connected to the 3 network, but using Wi-Fi.
And this is voice over Wi-Fi, correct?
This is voice over Wi-Fi, but
VO Wi-Fi.
But this is 3GPP voice over Wi-Fi. Do not confuse it with over-the-top Wi-Fi.
No, but you're still tied to a carrier there, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a service that your carrier must supply. Yes, and
yes,
indeed does that. 3 does that.
So if I'm on, no, here's my problem exactly. Let
me explain what your problem is. In order to get this to work, you need 2 things, not 1 thing, but 2 things. Firstly, you need a phone that supports 3GPP Wi-Fi calling, and I'm not sure that yours does. And secondly, you need a network operator. Your service must come from a network operator who supports it. And if you've got both of those together, then you'll find that your network operator will send an operator profile to the phone. In my case, I've got an iPhone 7 Plus here. And that will then enable the Wi-Fi calling. It's not enabled as native. So you've got to have an operator profile sent to your phone, which will live it up. And then your phone will do it.
Which, by the way, implies, does that not imply also that your operator needs to have your phone in the database? You can't buy a phone that is theoretically capable of doing this if it's not in their database, I would say.
Well, yes, you can, because
is it not bound to the SIM?
Yeah, yes, I tried to explain.
Yeah. All right, go,
your
James.
SIM into the phone. It's the SIM that then authenticates and attaches to the network. And part of that data attachment declares, actually in clear, incidentally, it's not encrypted, it declares what type of handset you are using. And if the handset is a compatible sort of handset, the network then says, oh, he's got a compatible handset. We'll send him an update to his handset, which is compatible, which will then enable Wi-Fi calling. So that's where it works.
So quick question here. That means that if you've got VO Wi-Fi, voice over Wi-Fi, if you have the capability and it's all working and everything and it's in your home and that's wonderful, does that mean that no matter whose Wi-Fi you're on, you can use it as for
Correct.
calls?
As long as you've got an open channel at half decent speed, which is capable of attaching back into the operator's call network, it will automatically switch across, as long as you've got Wi-Fi calling enabled. You're being distracted, aren't you?
Yes, it's but that call for garbage. We're good. Garbage collection,
relief, isn't it?
Garbage collection.
So Randy, what I'm afraid you're probably going to be forced to do is to update your phone, your handset, to one that is capable of doing this 3GPP Wi-Fi calling, and not all are.
But only if the carrier supports it. What is Corrado showing?
Still network cell info, and you can see what are the characteristics of your phone.
Yeah.
Now, what display are you on there?
The last page. The very
page.
last page of that.
Let's see.
So in this case, because Corrado has got and not wanting to diss your Android handset, it's probably an incredibly good value for money handset. But in this case, this particular one does not appear to be VoLTE or Wi-Fi call capable at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Oh, it says
maybe with a software update.
Yeah, indeed. And
it is voice capable. It's already.
Can I just point out that my phone is Wi-Fi capable, but the SIM I have in it is not.
Yes.
So if you look at this, it says that it is not capable, but it has a 3 SIM in there, which is the same as James has got in his iPhone 7. And this device, as an Nexus 5X, is Wi-Fi capable, but it is not connected.
Interestingly, and if you look at mine, I have got exactly the same phone as Andy, but you'll note that I am Wi-Fi call capable because I'm using, in this case, EE, which offers the service.
To be fair, sorry, that says VoLTE capable and Wi-Fi call available. So it doesn't say the capability of the phone, but the availability on the phone. So it's a combination of the phone and the SIM. Go back a bit.
Okay, but this phone is definitely VoLTE capable, VOL voice over LTE capable, and yet it says no because on this carrier, I think these displays have to do with the carrier too, don't you think?
Yes, they do. Yeah, it's the two variables. So you've got the
That's
carrier
important.
plus the phone.
Yeah, if you look at the tab name is device plus SIM. So it's the combination of two.
But there's no way to see if your device, this app doesn't show whether your device is capable or not. I know because, first of all, people have said in the forums that they were on T-Mobile and that they were using, now I can't remember if it was voice over Wi-Fi or VoLTE, but I think it's both. I think the phone does both. It's just that it only works for certain carriers.
Normally the phone uses the same mechanism. Interestingly enough, voice over LTE, VoLTE, it just uses SIP VoIP. But what they don't explain is what they wrap that SIP up in. So the underlying levels in the protocol are they're hardened. So you get a much more robust voice channel than you would with over-the-top voice over IP, where you're just running something like a voice over IP client like Bria or something like that over the top. It will work better.
As Dan Jenkins is commenting intensely, I asked him if he wanted to join us.
Yeah, let's get him in here.
Well, now he's in the middle of an emergency bit of work, so he can't, even though I just sent him the link. Anyway, what time is it? It's 1:45. So if we've had enough,
did we learn anything from that?
Well, for the moment, what I've learned is that I don't see any other solution other than changing operators. And I do have a €10 a month plan. It has a very low data. That's another consideration. I mean, how much data do you need? How much data do you need?
Have you made the decision that you are going to go to a service that offers you voice over Wi-Fi?
No, because I don't know who does, and I don't know what the conditions are to get that happening. If I could buy a phone and it would work, that would be wonderful. But I'm not going to change operators just for that because sucks around here. It's not good at all. So even around in the neighborhood. And how did I know that? Because I used all these different apps that we mentioned to determine that.
But of course, if you can use Wi-Fi and you've got brilliant Wi-Fi.
But when you step out the door, James, you're dead until you get into another neighborhood. So that's no good.
Yeah, that might be true. But you've got to look at the percentage of your time that you're wanting to use your phone. And if you spend 90% of your time actually sitting where you're sitting right now, then coverage in that place is going to be the most important thing.
No, because coverage in this place, if I needed to use Wi-Fi, I could get a number from IPI and just use that, which I could.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, of course, you wouldn't get the traffic that's aimed at your cellular phone.
Oh, but I would, because I would forward my cell. See, I don't get a million calls either. That's another thing.
Okay, well, what do you do about your SMSs?
Well, I get the SMSs via Google Voice and email and everything else.
Well, I think the answer that you should give there is, well, who gets SMSs these days? Because you use.
Well, I do.
You use lots of other services. But the answer to that one is to perhaps use a carrier where all of the SMS messages are home routed, and that they can be sent in different ways depending on how you're attached. And you're going to say, what's home routing, James?
No, I'm going to say that Somebody just asked me about Project Fi, and I mentioned that since I'm in France,
Yeah,
that's
Project
not an
Fi
option.
is.
Well, it's not going to work here, is it?
Well, Project Fi will work in France, but the problem is you can't buy it anywhere else other than in the USA.
Which I could do, but I'm not going to. I don't have a Pixel either, so there you go. Look, this is a great argument against being locked into one technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We all have, everybody on this panel has the wherewithal to roll their own service, right? We could do this. We could all do this. And even though I'm trying to think if my carrier free charges, I think it's 5 cents a minute. But I get very few phone calls. So if I was going to route all my
I've got
calls,
the solution here. Here's the solution.
Something with a Raspberry Pi.
Really
Tons
well.
of
a handful of phones.
Actually, now.
You need a backpack when you leave home. You need a backpack to take them all with you. And
Well,
one of them
got a
might break
belt.
at some point, and then you've got to find it and take it out.
Doesn't he have a tool belt?
You need a bandolero. I don't know about a tool belt.
I have a question
there
for you all about coverages, but because this is all Eurocentric, which is fine. But my brother-in-law lives in a relatively new development, fairly affluent. According to all of the carrier maps, there's great coverage. He's now had 3 different mobile carriers. He's had Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, and all of them barely have coverage on his property and don't have any coverage in his house. And all of them offered either Wi-Fi handoff within the house or a femtocell with varying different sort of commercial realities. In some cases, they gave it to him because the coverage was bad. In other cases, he had to buy it. But he moved to Verizon, who purportedly has the best network in the country, and it still doesn't work. What's the solution in such circumstances? Because you kind of
probably
in a
the
dead
best one's Wi-Fi calling, assuming that he's got half decent Wi-Fi in his house. Wi-Fi calling is a reasonably good solution.
Yeah, Wi-Fi calling is fine, except that, and I'm with you on that. I recommended him to the Ubiquiti Amplify mesh router because his house is big enough. It's something on the order of 3,600 square feet. It's big enough that a single consumer router doesn't do the job. And of course, when they built it just 3 years ago, they didn't pull Ethernet through the walls as I suggested. So they're like he wanted to be wireless, because wireless is hip and cool. Ethernet is old and stodgy and reliable. So you end up saying, okay, instead of relying upon the carrier's network and network engineering team, you have to do your own network engineering, and not everybody is up to that. I just think it's funny. I think it's funny that in an affluent developed area, you can find yourself in a dead spot and facing investment.
Can I just jump first with a very old-fashioned solution? If you have a landline in the house, you just redirect calls when you're out of coverage from your mobile to your landline. And that's done.
So using a service like if this then that maybe that when you leave and your location updates say you're no longer at home, suddenly your landline calls are forwarded to your mobile.
Yeah, but that is not a particularly nice solution because
no, it's not.
That doesn't deal with your SMS. Plus, most of your life is on this device, not on your landline phone, your old POTS phone.
Well, it's one of the reasons why
T-Mobile is the device you want your calls to come in on, because that's where you run your life from.
Well, that's very personal.
Very good, because
we don't know that that's true for everybody.
I have a very good DECT phone, wireless phone at home with a very wide coverage that covers. I can roam around the neighborhood. Yes, exactly.
Like this one.
Yes.
In fact, probably exactly that model.
Exactly that model. with a 510 base that I can roam around when I walk the dog, I take that one with me, and most of the time I am still covered with that.
Which incidentally does SMS as well.
Exactly.
If you have fixed
the issue is how you get to forward your SMS from your mobile to that when you're home. And
that's easy,
tricky.
James. You forward it to email.
Yep.
Like Google Voice does.
How easy is that? Well,
Very
Google
easy
Voice,
with Google Voice.
With Google Voice, it is easy, but the problem with Google Voice is that you get a US number, which is particularly useful not when you're in France or UK, because people will not call you on a US number.
Well, I mean, this begs the question of how, one of the important things we were trying to talk about evaluating coverage and maybe getting your coverage together, figuring out what carriers you should be using and so on. And one of the things about this profile has to do with, my contention is don't ask your friends what the best network is, because unless you spend 24/7 with this person, you don't have the same profile. So the profile.
Yeah, you're right that your friend will not live in your house. So
well, and even if they did, and even if your friend did live in your house, they may go play pool Friday night, whatever. Anyway, the point is, the thing you have to do is a very personal profile. And part of that has to do with travel. Now, you all know, let's just take the people on this call, those of you who I can see, we all have very different profiles. And Michael is in the US. He may go to Canada. He may go here and there, but he is in the United States most of the time. And he's certainly in North America 99% of the time, I would say. Whereas the rest of us you guys are in the UK. You may be all over the United Kingdom, which isn't that united anymore for a while. You may also be over in Europe. You may be in Berlin. I may be in Berlin. But the point is, I don't spend more than 5% of my time in Europe traveling. I am here most of the time, and I am in one city most of the time. So for my evaluation, if I learned that Network X was great in Paris, but not so good in the provinces, it would be useless to me because I'm only in Paris 5 to 10% of the year, not even. So, this is an important consideration. I know it seems obvious in an afterthought, but the fact is you need to know where you go. You need to know where you spend your time. By the way, the 80-20 rule would say that you spend probably 80% of your time in one place. Would that be true for everybody here or not? 80% of your time minimum in one place.
For most people. And then for those people who do a lot of international travel, there are solutions like this one.
Absolutely.
You might recognize the name.
Although we don't pronounce that name anymore.
We don't. But no, things like this, multi-IMSI SIMs, multi-identity SIMs, are really, really good if you spend, a lot of time away from home trotting around the world.
And I wanted to get into that, particularly with you, James, and anybody else who has any comments on it. Because first question I asked, and Corrado and I discussed this a little bit, but I was wondering whether the future is eSIMs without, in other words, without, wait a minute, we have a question. What does it take to get a multi-operator neutral host running? Good question. And that would be to James.
Who did that? Who asked that question, just out of interest? Who
Mr. or Mrs. Worthman. I think it's a Mr. I'm pretty sure, but I forgot the first name. Ben, I think it is. It's Ben Worthman.
Right.
Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's Ben.
You probably noticed that there aren't a whole load of people operating multi-operator neutral host solutions. So we're talking about what do you need to do to get multi-operator neutral host working in your own home. And the fundamental, there are two tricky problems with that. The biggest one is actually finding somebody who's going to run the back-end service for your cell to do the authentication and then,
oh, bloody hell.
And do the settlement on the back end. Yeah,
yes.
You're absolutely right. And strangely enough, we know somebody or a team of people, don't we, Andy, who are working on that extremely hard at this moment in time.
I might have spent all afternoon with my head in AHSS. Yes.
Yeah, indeed. So our objective is to make deploying a 4G LTE cell, a small cell, as easy as deploying a Wi-Fi access point, so that any phone from any operator that comes anywhere near it will, in the absence of their own network signal, will see it and attach to it. And so that is coming. We're not quite there yet. Hopefully we'll have a very large amount of money off a UK government ministry very shortly to run 50 to 70 small cell trial here in the beautiful, wonderful area of outstanding natural beauty. That is the Chalk Valley, which incidentally is also the largest wireless not spot in the whole of the south of England.
Not spot, that's a good one. James, anyway, okay, we will get back to that when it happens and as it happens.
Yeah, we need to do a complete show on multi-operator neutral
and
hosts.
Of course, we will soon. But I wanted to ask you about the eSIMs, the SIMs that are not physical SIMs.
Yeah, which is really interesting because you know that Apple have had eSIMs in their iPads for some time. And we were kind of hoping that the iPhone 10 was going to have an eSIM in it, because we know that they have the technology to do the VoLTE piece. We know because we know who designed that. But sadly, it was not to be. The first mass production phone to launch with a full eSIM capability is actually the Pixel 2, the new Google phone, and that currently is only working with one operator, and that is, not surprisingly, Google Fi. And so, sadly, if you buy a Pixel 2 here in UK, yeah, even though it's got eSIM capability, it won't work because there's nobody supporting it yet. But if you buy a Pixel 2 in the US, then you can get Google Fi on it.
So Google Fi works through the eSIM?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go in and you get in the US, buy a Pixel 2 with no SIM in it, you can get it up and running with Google Fi because it's already got an eSIM in it.
Isn't Google Fi still limited to certain areas in the US? I think it is.
No, it'll operate globally.
I did get, well, I mean, I'm not talking about the physicality of it, but the billing / membership, because I signed up for it as I do everything with my US address.
Sadly, we've lost Kathleen, because I know that Kathleen has a Google Fi SIM and she could tell us about it and how it worked.
Yeah, she had to go do something else. What I was going to say is I signed up for an early thing of Google Fi, even though I do have a US address. So I signed up for it, and I did get a thing because it was by zip code, if you remember. Yep. And I did get a thing saying, okay, now, hey, you can come on in. But of course, there was no way I could do it because I'm not there actually physically. But I think it may still be, it's not 1,000% rolled out, right? I think it's still limited.
Okay, Google Fi, as a service, does domestic roaming on other networks when it's
right.
Because
3 networks.
Google don't have their own radio network, and then when it gets
Sprint, T-Mobile, and
AT&T.
AT&T.
But then when you come abroad, come out of the US, it then roams internationally. Yeah. And but one of the reasons why they're not pushing that internationally is it costs them money. Sure. And whilst it does work and it's inclusive, there are constraints on how long you can spend outside of the USA. And that's just simply to stop people like you, Randy, who live in France, buying a Google Fi SIM and using it full time in France.
Which I wouldn't do, since I can do the same thing with Google Voice if I really wanted to. But anyway, getting back to the eSIM concept, James, my question actually was related to the topic that we're covering right now, which has to do with evaluating cell networks. And you and I spoke of this before, and I want to get back into it. The eSIM allows you to download a profile somehow. And so I could theoretically, if there were no business constraints, the eSIM, you could say, oh, I want to be on free mode. Oh, wait a minute, I want to be on 3. Oh, wait a minute, I want to be on O2 or whatever your other, whoever be British Telecom. You can do this, and it takes what, a minute or two to change, correct?
Yeah, that you can get the profile. In fact, it's the IMSI. You get a new IMSI pushed out to your phone. The IMSI is the identity with which you connect to a network. But the bit that in most scenarios you would have great difficulty on pushing across the signaling channel is the cryptographic key variables, and they tend to be installed in the SIM card at manufacture. And up until very recently, there's been a ban on people pushing cryptographic key variables across the air because potentially it could be a vulnerability.
Man in the middle.
Having said that, the GSMA 3GPP world have only recently approved a mechanism whereby it is possible to push cryptographic key variables across the air. But having said that, most of the eSIM players that are out there, like Google, don't actually push cryptographic key variables. They put in the case of the Pixel 2, there are a whole load of Google key variables that are put into the phone at manufacture. And they want to run it that way because if it's done that way, then all of the attachments and all of the authentication is run back through Google. And then once you attach and authenticate, you can then proxy the answer, yeah, he's allowed in, he's not allowed in, back to the network that you're roaming on. So in the case of Google, and in fact most operators, they would want to be always in the signaling path. And so that's why Google have done it that way. Complicated. There's a lot of complexity in these things.
But my idea was that someday you would be able to just go, well, today I want to be with so. In other words, this would have to be associated with micropayments, and I know that the average carrier
already with the Apple SIMs in the iPad Pros. In fact, what the justification that I used for buying this thing that I'm talking to you on now is that it's got an eSIM, and I wanted to take it to pieces to find out exactly how it works. And the service that you get on these things is that you are able to do exactly as you described, and you can switch between different operators in different countries.
But business-wise,
the first generation of the iPads and the Apple SIM did not allow you to do that, but this generation does.
All right, but the big impediment here is business. In other words, what would be interesting would be to be able to switch. So getting back to our main problem here, which is I find myself in a neighborhood where there's only one carrier that works. What would be interesting, I know it sounds crazy, but if we were consumer centric, you could keep the same phone number. Now you can port your number, obviously. But what would be good would be to have a number and go, okay, today I'm going to be with Orange, but tomorrow I'm going to be with British Telecom, and have that same number. The day we can do that, and I'm concluding with this kind of, waiting for final comments from everybody because we have done an hour here. But the point is, to me, with micropayments, meaning, okay, you put a deposit of €5 or pounds down or something, dollars. And then you try, so you could try carriers in your area, but you could also switch from day to day. Now, obviously, the operators, the actors in this world don't want to do that. They don't have any interest in that. They need to show subscribers. They have stockholders. So that's part of the model. I'm not that much of a hippie, I've lived a long time, but I am not that far gone yet. But someday, the mechanism may be in place to do this. No?
Well,
from my point of view,
I think
if I can, James, it's about billing. You need to run always on and only on pay as you go. So you prepay and then you use your credit. to switch over to different things. Otherwise, it's a nightmare to bill the customer for just the day he's on or not. That's a lot of work at the back office for the provider to bill you if you are on or off. And how do you switch your number from one provider to the other on the fly? There's a lot of signaling that has to go back and forth. When you port your number, it takes a while for the network to propagate through. So there's a lot of technical obstacles to that. From what I see, James, do you have any other insights?
Yeah, well, we've kind of done that already. What you need to do here, in order to make that work, you've got to separate your mobile service into two parts. The first part is how you attach to the network. So you've got to have a mechanism which allows you to flexibly attach to the radio network that gives you the best coverage in the best way. And you've got to do that in a cost-effective manner. Once you've done that, you then need to map all of your services, so all of your numbers, all of your identities, onto that attachment. And that's exactly what we did with, well, this particular thing. So we've got multiple IMSIs in a SIM, which then it'll then connect to a network using the optimum IMSI to attach to that network to give you the best possible data connection at the most cost-effective rate. Once you've got that, what we do is we then map multiple user profiles. And note I say multiple because if you know me, you know I've got multiple numbers. You map all of those user profiles onto the currently active IMSI, which is what's attaching you to the network.
But you could do that because you have a limited, not to diminish what you did, a limited number of service users. If you try to do that on the whole of UK or worldwide cellular networks, and these switches and all that signaling to switch this profile to connect to an IMSI would be massive, overwhelming.
Well, that's exactly what we did do. And it's not overwhelming. It is a boundable problem. But what the challenge is to then sell that back as a service at a price level which is competitive with something like Free in France. And you can't do that because there is a certain level of complexity and cost involved in the equation, which means that multi-IMSI type solution is always going to sell at a premium and cost you something like ×4 or ×5 what you can get in your own backyard from somebody like Free or Lebara or somebody like that, who has a much simpler, much cheaper solution. So if you are a person who spends virtually all of its time in one country, then you're not going to buy a multi-IMSI solution. But if you're a globetrotter, then you are going to buy a multi-IMSI True Phone SIM, aren't you? Because it just makes sense.
That's the reason for being for something like TruePhone and whoever else.
Or a better example is actually if you're a Formula One team or a Russian oligarch or a pop star who just routinely goes around the world, then there is no other solution that meets the bill. And okay, it will cost you more, but it's the one that works.
But I do think that in closing, I think that what we could say is that when mobile first started, I don't know, there wasn't a lot of possibilities for pay-as-you-go. Mostly, particularly when the iPhone came out, the first smartphone comes out, right? You're signed in the United States to 2 years, 24 months of AT&T. And, you know, fewer and fewer operators are proposing this silly idea that you're going to get an iPhone for $100 because you're signing up for 24 months and you're going to be paying like $2,400 for the iPhone, but who cares, right? Because you got an iPhone.
Subsidized handsets, yes.
Yeah, I mean that's a sucker thing. But the point is that's less and less now. But when in the advent of smartphones, you signed up and you were there for 24 months. I think pay as you go. Well, some of you would know better than me. As a consumer, I can see that I have a whole panoply of pay as you go. there's almost no advantage now to signing a long contract. It's a little cheaper, and you can get a phone for much cheaper, but you're paying way more for the phone. If anybody does the math, there's no.
Well, if I can, you can also get SIM-only contracts where you have your own phone and you are on a contract. I am on a contract for £7 a month with unlimited text, unlimited data, and 200 gig of text. Phone calls unlimited, 200 gig of data.
Yeah.
How much data?
Gigs, 200 gig of data.
That's good.
200 gigs of data.
Yes.
On
who needs 200 gigs of data? You must be watching like 6 porn channels at once for a month.
No, I'm not. So yeah.
What do you mean you're not?
200 gigs of data for £7 a month.
Yes.
The real question there is that data confined to your phone, or can you share it on a Wi-Fi hotspot?
No, I can't.
No tethering.
Right.
No
tethering allowed. So that is 200 gigs for you to watch lots of videos on your tiny screen device.
Yeah.
But all kidding aside, I mean,
Google Maps when you're out and about, connectivity, 4G, whatever, for anything you are when you are out. So.
But that is an edge case. In other words, watching. I watched one show on Netflix, for example, so it was like, I don't even remember, it's a couple hundred megs, right? But I mean, this is not something I would do generally, because you can always wait to your own Wi-Fi. I mean, that's an edge case, wanting to watch 200 gigs of video. And for anything else other than video or heavy conferencing, you don't need it, right? So
no, absolutely. Anyway. And it's probably a gamble by the provider, because I never use more than probably a gig.
Well, and Corrado, that is exactly why they have all these plans that give you unlimited voice when you use 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now I'm on a plan, it's unlimited voice, but I know that I don't even use 2 hours. I could be on a 2-hour plan. So they've all got us hooked because we need the data. We need at least 5 gigs, right, of data a month, just to be sure that we can always do something if we're stuck someplace in an elevator. But, things have changed since the advent of all this thing. Anyway,
in the elevator shaft, you have 4G.
Yeah, well, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Who hasn't watched a TV show before cell phones when people are stuck someplace and there's no cell phone to communicate? Anyway, anybody have any final thoughts here before we conclude?
No, I may have a question for James. eSIMs can be multi-IMSI or not?
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
Yes, they can. So something that people don't really grasp is that the SIM is actually not the physical container, the little plastic thing, one of these. That's not a SIM. SIM is actually a lump of code that sits inside. And the platform, so this is a UICC, Universal Integrated, what does the CC stand for? Something card.
Something.
Yeah. And it's possible to actually run programs on that or the embedded eSIM variety. We know because we write code, SIM code, which then does things. We run applications on the SIM. I just contradicted myself. So you can run programs on the platform which is containing the SIM code, independent of the handset, and then use the signaling channel, which is always open and it's always free, because it has to be, because if it wasn't always open, always free, you'd never be able to authenticate. What that means is that you can actually use the signaling channel for all kinds of interesting purposes. It's a bit like, remember the old days when we had ISDN with 2B plus D? People used to actually use the D channel to tunnel through and do their email continuously without actually having to dial up. And I bet you were one of those that did that, weren't you, Corrado? Because you're
Corrado did that.
It's like the push-to-talk that some carriers in the US do. So you can use push-to-talk, and that is feeding what you're saying in your phone through the data channel.
Well, you can't actually, because practically you're limited to about 200 bits per second you can get through on the signaling channel on these. But 200 bits per second is enough to do things like pushing new configurations, actually reprogramming the SIM code within the whatever receptacle you've got in there. You can do that, but it takes a little bit of time at 200 bits per second. I mean, you're not going to do voice, but you certainly can do messaging. So there have been occasions where certain people have been on, say, Virgin Atlantic, who rather helpfully give you a 2G service whilst you're going across the Atlantic. Some people have been known to spend hours just playing with the signaling channel rather than playing with the entertainment system.
I would like to
huge amounts of fun with that.
I'd like to conclude with the very low-tech equivalent of that, which was that my mother and her sister used to communicate by calling each other collect, and then the other side. So I have a collect call for so and so, and the person on the other end would go, "Well, they're not here right now," and then the originator would say, "Well, would she be around at say 9 p.m.?" And then the other person would say, "Oh, maybe possibly at 9:15. So there's this transmission of data free. And remember, in those days, telephone calls cost a lot. We're talking 450 miles away, by the way. Fortunately, those days are long gone. But anyway, there were all kinds of little
you could communicate with things like that. Very similar sort of thing I did once upon a time. Used Iridium satellite terminals, and it communicated not by passing any data, but by ringing different numbers in a different sequence. So you'd have a block of 1,000 numbers, and then the terminal would then phone that number, that number, that number, that number, followed by that's the end of my message number, and you could then decode from your code book what that message meant. So you never actually picked up. So you never ever actually paid anything, but you were able to communicate.
Sounds like you were part of the Enigma program in World War II, but you're not that old.
Well,
not quite.
What it really says is that humans will always find a way through and are very inventive and very clever with the way that they approach technology.
I think that, Andy, your conclusion is the greatest. And we're going to stop this right now. We have Dave Toth is coming on soon. He asked for a date, and we will certainly give him that.
The latest on buffer bloat.
Yeah, no, he has another thing he's doing. And also, we're going to be talking, hopefully, to Craig about DialPad. We're playing around with it. We're going to be talking about DialPad. It's a crazy thing, but hey, we're here for crazy things. So, with that, next week, unless anybody has a last word. No last words. Okay.
Nope.
Join us next week for VUC. We've been going for 11 years. We hope to go for another 11. I'll be 90 later.